My name is Karen Doyle, 45, former Air Force major, logistics. I spent 2 decades counting pallets, tracking fuel, moving people and gear to places most folks can't spell. I retired with a box of challenge coins, a back that pops when I tie my boots, and a strong dislike for group chats. I bought a small cabin outside Dubois, Wyoming, because silence is cheaper than therapy and pine air doesn't argue back. The cabin is 800 square feet if you count the closet like a realtor. 1 room big enough for a table, a couch, and a space heater that hums like a distant generator, a tight bedroom, a bathroom with a shower that requires a turn and a shrug to get in. The roof is sound. The chimney draws. The well water tastes like clean stone. I could live anywhere, but I wanted a place where the night actually gets dark and you can hear your own heartbeat if you stand still long enough. I filed the deed at the county office, drove back with a paper folder that said "recorded" in a blue stamp, and set the folder on the kitchen counter like a trophy. I didn't frame anything. I don't frame things. I lined a drawer with manila folders, labeled each one with a black Sharpie deed, insurance, utilities, maintenance, because life runs smoother when the paper knows where to go. My first morning, I put coffee on and made a list. Old habit. In the Air Force, we called it a 6 a.m. stand-up. I call it Tuesday. The list said, replace carbon monoxide detector, test GFCI outlets, buy a bear-resistant trash bin, move the fire extinguisher where you won't knock it over with your hip. I added, get a real doormat, and immediately scratched it out. A real doormat sends the wrong message. I prefer people know they're not staying. I checked the property line with a printed parcel map and a cheap measuring wheel that clicks like a cricket. The boundary markers were where they were supposed to be. The previous owner left an old grill, 3 bent rakes, and a plastic deer that had seen better Decembers. I hauled the junk to the back of the shed, swept the porch, and oiled the hinges until the door closed with a single, clean sound. You can tell how a day will go by how your door closes. Mine sounded like, finally. By mid-morning, a cow moose moved through the trees and took a long look at me. I took a long look back. We both decided not to make it a thing. I made a sandwich, sat on the steps in wool socks, and ate while the wind came down the ridge. If you've never heard real wind in timber, it does not whisper. It states facts. I brought in my tools: impact driver, stud finder, level, corded drill that predates streaming services because nothing ruins a quiet life faster than a crooked shelf. I mounted a small key hook by the door at eye level. I set the coffee maker where morning light would hit the mug. I measured the kitchen window for a shade and wrote the number on painter's tape stuck to the counter. 34.5 x 58 true. I don't trust the Notes app. Paper survives low batteries. There's a certain way the day slows when you're alone and you actually like it. No base traffic, no badge checks, no fire alarm drills that always happen when you finally sit down. I stacked my uniforms in a bin and slid them under the bed. I kept one. You keep one for reasons you can't explain to people who never wore one. After lunch, I drove into town for mail keys and a grocery run. The postmaster asked where I was coming from. I said, a lot of airports, which was close enough. At the hardware store, I bought a lock set, 2 extra smoke detectors, LED bulbs, a water filter, and a bear bin that costs more than my first car insurance premium. At the general store, I picked up coffee, eggs, tortillas, and hot sauce. The clerk carded me for a 6-pack of beer I wasn't sure I even wanted, and we both pretended it was a compliment. Back at the cabin, I installed a deadbolt and tested the strike 3 times. The 3rd time is the truth. I mounted a camera at the driveway facing the approach, not because I'm paranoid, because I like to know what I'm dealing with before I open a door. It's a small unit with a wide field of view and no subscription I didn't agree to. I set motion zones so wind and deer wouldn't ping my phone all night. I don't need digital jump scares. I called my sister, Trisha, to give her my new address. She didn't pick up. She texted that she was in a meeting. Typical. She works in elder care administration in Cheyenne and uses the word capacity, like it's a blessing or a curse depending on the day. I sent the address with a "just so you have it" and left it at that. I put on a pot of chili and read the manual for the generator, because manuals matter when it's 3 a.m. and the power line does what power lines do in rural zip codes. The manual was clear, which was suspicious. I took notes anyway, taped them inside the lid, and ran the unit for 10 minutes to make sure it wouldn't surprise me later. It purred. I like machines that tell the truth. That evening, I walked the road to the highway and back with a reflective vest because getting hit by a truck is a stupid way to end a quiet chapter. The sky went pink behind the ridgeline. Somewhere, a dog barked twice at nothing. I could feel my shoulders drop in a way they hadn't since tech school. People talk about decompressing like it's a yoga thing. Sometimes it's just air that isn't recirculated and a horizon you didn't earn with hazard pay. I slept well the first night, which felt like a win. No dreams, no bass horn sneaking into my head, no doors slamming in a barracks hallway. I woke at 0530 because body clocks are stubborn and brewed coffee strong enough to argue. I ate at the counter and scrolled the local news. Nothing on fire, nothing frozen. A school board dispute about buses. Quiet news is the best news. I started a maintenance log on a legal pad. Date, task, notes, replaced filter, cleaned flue cap, tightened porch rail. People think this is overkill. Those people call a handyman for everything and act surprised when the bill has a comma. I'd rather use a wrench than a credit card. Around mid-morning, the cell signal brightened up a bar and my phone rang. Trisha. I hit accept and leaned an elbow on the counter. Hey, I said. You moved in? She asked. Yesterday. How's it feel? Like my ears can rest. I bet, she said, and her voice carried that mix of proud and distracted. Listen, I need a favor. It's temporary. There are words that start small fires. Temporary is one of them. What's up? It's about my in-laws, she said. They're in a bind. Long story short, they lost their lease, and the new place has a wait list. It's just a couple of months, maybe less. They need somewhere to land. You've got that cabin and what? I asked. And it's quiet, and there's space, and you're there by yourself, she said, hurrying now. They're easy. They keep to themselves. You won't even notice them. We'll help with groceries. We can chip in for whatever. I looked at the counter where my new key sat on the legal pad next to the word ownership I'd written without thinking this morning. I looked at the door I'd just made right. Quiet has a sound. You know when it's about to go. How did they lose their lease? I asked. It's not their fault, she said fast. The landlord sold the building. Everyone had to go. It's a mess. End of 20s. How old are they? I asked. 60s. Mobility issues? Some, she said. Nothing you can't handle. They'll be grateful. Grateful is not a care plan, I said. It's family, Karen, she said. And it arrived like a verdict she thought would carry the day. We take care of each other. I'm not a facility, I said. And this isn't an open dorm. She went quiet. In the distance on my end, wind moved the edge of the porch screen. On her end, I could hear a copier whine and someone asking for toner. Real life, same as always. They can't go back to our place, she said. Greg's hours got cut, and we're catching up on a few things. It's tight. Tight how? Tight, she said, and I could hear the don't ask baked into it. Look, it's a few weeks. You have room. I have one bedroom, I said. And a small couch. This is not a duplex. They'll take the couch, she said. They're flexible. Couches are not flexible, I said. They're bad for spines. She exhaled into the mic. You always make everything sound like a checklist. It keeps planes in the air, I said, and people alive. This isn't a deployment, she said. It's family. I noticed, I said. She shifted tone, the softer one she uses when she wants a quick yes. Please, just until the new place opens. I'm juggling a lot, and this would help. I looked at the camera feed in the corner of my phone. Blue sky. A gravel drive with a single set of tire marks. The edge of my truck, my porch rail, straight. I set the phone face down on the counter like that would quiet it. Let me think, I said. How long do you need to think? She asked. As long as it takes to do it right, I said. There was a silence I could feel in my jaw. She filled it the way people fill silences when they're already halfway to a conclusion. They're coming up Friday, she said. We'll sort the rest later. Vor. The sound of her voice still lingered after I hung up. I stared at the phone like it might apologize. The wind pressed against the window, and for the first time, the cabin didn't sound peaceful, it sounded small. I walked to the sink, rinsed my coffee mug. and set it upside down on the rack. Then I went outside, because breathing air that hadn't been filtered through someone's bad decisions felt like the only rational thing to do. The sky was flat gray, the kind that doesn't promise rain, but doesn't rule it out either. I walked the tree line, checking the fence posts like a person making sure she still owned the ground under her feet. Friday, she'd said. 2 days. 2 days until my quiet became a shared resource. I pulled my notebook from my jacket pocket. It was an old green military pad, the kind that fit perfectly in a cargo pocket. I opened to a blank page and wrote one word: boundaries. Under it, I listed what I could live with and what I couldn't. Number 1, no one tells me how to live in my own house. Number 2, noise level stays below jet engine. Number 3, if they break something, they fix it. Number 4, leave date must be written down, not spoken. I closed the notebook and felt the paper edges against my fingers, crisp and steady. A plan always starts as a list. I didn't need to scream or throw things. I just needed structure. Military life teaches you that the loudest person is rarely the one in control. That night, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't angry, anger wastes energy. I just kept thinking about all the times I'd been voluntold to do something because it was easier for everyone else. Extra shifts, sudden deployments, the "can you handle it, Major?" kind of favors that always ended with someone else getting credit. Family uses the same playbook, just with guilt instead of rank. Thursday morning, I drove into town. The ranger station sat just off the main road, a low log building with a carved bear out front. Inside, it smelled like wet pine and coffee that had died hours ago. A man in uniform looked up from his desk. "Morning. What can I help you with?" "Bought a place up near Willow Creek," I said. "Wanted to ask about local wildlife. Bears, wolves, that sort of thing." He smiled, polite but cautious. "You're new here." "Retired military," I said. "Figured I'd get ahead of any surprises." He nodded. "Smart. Bears are active this time of year. Wolves too, though they keep their distance if you don't attract them." "What attracts them?" I asked. "Food. Mostly. Trash, meat, pet food. Anything that smells like calories." I took notes, like I was back in a briefing. Distance? Wolves can smell from miles away. You keep your area clean, you won't have problems. You bait them, you will. ND4. "I'm not planning on baiting anything," I said, because it's best to sound predictable when you're planning something else. He gave me a pamphlet. "Keep that handy. And hey, nice to see someone preparing before things happen. Most folks wait until a bear's already in the kitchen." "I like to stay ahead of the curve," I said, folding the pamphlet into my jacket pocket. Back in town, I stopped at an outdoor supply shop. The walls were lined with camouflage gear and taxidermy heads that looked unimpressed by everything. I bought 2 trail cameras, motion activated with night vision. The clerk showed me how to sync them to my phone. "You hunting?" he asked. "More like observing," I said. He nodded like that made perfect sense. "Just don't put them too close to your door. You'll end up with more raccoon selfies than you want." I paid cash. Habit. By the time I got back to the cabin, the clouds had cleared. The light came in sharp through the trees, cutting across the porch like stripes. I unpacked the cameras and set one facing the driveway, another at an angle toward the clearing. Adjusted them until I could see every approach. Not paranoia, situational awareness. After that, I cleaned. Not because the place was dirty, but because order clears the mind. Every plate in its place, every tool on the pegboard. I vacuumed the rug even though it didn't need it. When you've spent half your life in quarters that smelled like metal and disinfectant, control becomes oxygen. At sunset, I brewed a fresh cup of coffee I didn't need and sat on the porch. The trees moved in the wind like waves. My phone buzzed with a text. "Leaving early tomorrow. Should get there by noon. Love you." No punctuation, no hesitation. I typed back one word. "Okay." I didn't send it. I deleted it, set the phone face down, and kept watching the woods. A rabbit darted across the clearing, vanished into brush. Predators know when to wait. At dawn, I drove into town again. This time to the butcher. "Need about 20 pounds of beef scraps," I told the guy behind the counter. He didn't ask why. Ranch country doesn't question meat orders. $40, he said. The smell hit as soon as he wrapped it. I drove back with the windows cracked and the cold air sharp enough to sting. At the cabin, I carried the cooler out behind the shed and opened it. Raw meat, thick fat, veins of red and white. The kind of scent that travels on the wind like a rumor. I walked 30 yards up the slope, checked the wind direction with a wet finger, and spread the scraps in 3 piles upwind, not too close to the house. I wasn't setting a trap. I was setting a lesson. You don't walk into another person's perimeter uninvited. When I was done, I locked the cabin windows, turned off unnecessary power, lowered the thermostat, and stood at the door for one long moment. The place looked exactly how I'd imagined it. Quiet, simple, clean, but now it had a new purpose. I closed the door, got in my truck, and started the engine. 5 hours to Cheyenne. My old townhouse still had furniture and Wi-Fi. I didn't need much else. That night, I set up my laptop on the kitchen table and pulled up the camera feeds. Nothing at first, just trees moving, shadows shifting. Then, around 10 a.m., the next morning, motion alerts. A silver SUV crawled up the gravel driveway. Out stepped Trisha, my sister, wearing a puffer jacket like armor, and behind her, her in-laws Eleanor and George Walsh. They looked around like the place had personally insulted them. "This is it," Eleanor said, voice carrying even through the microphone. "It smells like pine and mold," George grunted. "At least it's free." They walked toward the porch. Then something caught their attention. "George," Eleanor whispered, "what is that?" 3 shapes emerged from the tree-line gray. Silent, moving low. Wolves. Wild, curious, following the scent I'd left behind. George went pale. "Get in the car." The next 10 seconds were pure chaos. Doors slammed. Gravel spun under tires. The SUV backed down the drive faster than common sense allows. The wolves didn't chase. They went for the meat. The camera caught it all in perfect clarity. I sat there in my Cheyenne kitchen, watching the feed, coffee cooling beside me. My pulse stayed steady. I didn't smile, but I also didn't look away. When the SUV finally disappeared down the road, I took a slow sip and said out loud, "Welcome to Wyoming." The phone rang 10 minutes later. Trisha. "What the hell was that?" she shouted before I could answer. "They almost got attacked." "By what?" I asked, like I hadn't already seen it. "Wolves, Karen, wolves. You knew they were out there." "I told you it's wilderness," I said evenly. "That's why I moved there." "You planned this," she screamed. "You set them up." "I didn't invite the wildlife," I said. "They live there. I just pay property tax." "You're insane," she said, breath sharp, words cracking. "You could have killed them." "They're fine," I said. "Shaken, maybe. But fine. Consider it an orientation." She hung up. I let the silence sit, long enough to hear the fridge hum. Then I opened my notebook again and wrote a new line under boundaries. Lesson 1 delivered. No further explanation necessary. The next morning, I opened my laptop again. The screen showed an empty clearing, trees still as if nothing had happened. Wolves gone, meat piles gone, peace restored. The kind of peace that doesn't mean calm, it means warning delivered. The first call came before I finished my coffee. This time it wasn't my sister. It was her husband, Greg Walsh. His voice came through the speaker sharp, clipped, and practiced like someone who'd read too many management books. "You think this is funny?" he said. "My parents could have been mauled." I stirred my coffee. "You're exaggerating. They were never in danger. You baited wild animals onto that property." "Greg, I bought a house in wolf country. Wolves exist. I didn't invite them. I didn't build a fence to keep them out either." "You think you're clever," he said, breathing hard. "I'll make sure people know what kind of person you really are." "Which kind is that?" I asked. "The unstable kind," he snapped. "Trisha said you've been off since retiring. You live alone in the woods, paranoid, cameras everywhere, no one to keep an eye on you. That's not normal. Neither is moving your in-laws into someone else's home," I said. "We all have our quirks." He cursed, told me this wasn't over, and hung up. I set the phone down next to my mug and wrote in my notebook. Greg's defense strategy: discredit the witness. When you've spent 20 years in the military, you learn that most battles start long before the first shot. Greg was testing the terrain. He wanted to see how loud I'd get, but I don't do loud anymore. Loud wastes oxygen. By mid-morning, I started noticing missed calls. 2 from cousins I hadn't talked to since my mother's funeral. One voicemail from an aunt in Arizona asking if I was doing okay out there alone. Greg was spreading the word fast. It was impressive in a sleazy kind of way. Efficient, coordinated, almost tactical. I opened my email, checked the spam folder, and sure enough, there was a message forwarded from a distant relative. Subject: concern for Karen Doyle. The body read, "We're worried about her mental health. She's isolated, acting erratic, lashing out at family." It was signed by Greg and Tricia. Attached was a screenshot of the wolves from my own security camera, time-stamped. They'd cut the clip right before the SUV sped off, just enough to make it look sinister. I stared at it for a long time, then saved the email and the attachment to a folder labeled Evidence, Family Interference. I didn't bother replying. Silence is fuel when you know what you're doing. Around noon, I packed a sandwich and drove into town. The law office of Robert Kane & Associates sat above a bank, clean windows, brass lettering, and a parking lot that didn't believe in parallel lines. Inside, the waiting room smelled like paper and money. The receptionist smiled too widely. Robert Kane came out a few minutes later. Late 50s, gray at the temples, steady eyes. He shook my hand the way people do when they've seen worse days. "What can I do for you, Major Doyle?" "I'm being set up," I said. Not in the dramatic sense. More in the, let's make her look crazy so we can get her property sense. His expression didn't change. "Walk me through it." I told him everything about the cabin, the phone call, the wolves, the threats, the gossip campaign. He took notes quietly, nodding, like he was marking coordinates on a map. When I finished, he said, "They're building a narrative. Step 1, isolation. Step 2, incompetence. Step 3, control. Usually they call Adult Protective Services to get a wellness check. If that fails, they go for legal guardianship or conservatorship. I've seen similar tactics," I said. "Different battlefield, same cowardice." He smiled faintly. "You're not wrong. The good news is, documentation beats hearsay every time. You've got cameras, notes, recordings." "I've got more structure than the Pentagon," I said. "Perfect. Then we go on offense quietly. First, establish your competence legally. Second, make your assets untouchable. Third, record everything they try. At a low." He leaned back. "You want to protect your home. You also want to protect yourself from being declared unfit. That means a trust. I can create a revocable living trust where you're the grantor, but not the trustee. Makes it legally impossible for family to interfere." "What's the cost?" "About $2,500 total." "Do it." He nodded. "We'll file it under a week. Meanwhile, if anyone contacts authorities about your welfare, you stay calm, show them your paperwork, and call me immediately." "I can handle calm," I said. He studied me for a moment. "Something tells me you've handled worse." When I left the office, the sun was high, glaring off the windshield. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt organized. Organization is a form of peace most people never understand. Back at the cabin, I started cataloging everything. Every text, voicemail, screenshot, receipt. I labeled folders: financial records, communications, legal, property. It felt less like revenge and more like reconstruction after an airstrike, methodical, patient, inevitable. That evening, Tricia called again. No hi, no small talk. Just, "Greg's furious. He says you're trying to humiliate us." "Humiliation requires effort," I said. "I'm just existing." "You sent those wolves after his parents?" "They were already there, Tricia. Nature isn't a delivery service." She sighed, sounding tired. "You've changed. You used to be kind." "I'm still kind," I said. "Just not to people who mistake kindness for weakness." There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone realizing they've lost control of the conversation. "We're family," she said finally. "This shouldn't be a war." "It becomes one when you cross borders," I said. She didn't reply, just hung up again. I put the phone down and stared at the grain of the wooden table. A knot in the wood looked like a target ring. I drew a small dot in the center with my pen. Precision. The next day, I drove into Cody to pick up the draft documents from Kane's office. The papers were thick, stapled, tabbed, neat. I read every line before signing. The cabin now belonged to the trust, not me. On paper, I was just the occupant. To them, I no longer existed as a target they'd have to fight the law, not their sister. When I got home, I scanned the signed trust and stored digital copies in 2 separate cloud accounts. I printed one and locked it in a fireproof safe under the bed. My military ID went in the same box. You never know which document you'll need first. That night, the wind came hard down the ridge, rattling the eaves. I checked the cameras one more time. Empty driveway, quiet forest. Then, at 9:14 p.m., a motion alert pinged my phone. I opened the feed. Headlights. A sedan parked halfway up the drive. 2 silhouettes inside. They didn't get out. They just sat there, lights off after a minute, engine idling. I watched for 15 minutes. They didn't move. I recorded the feed, time-stamped it, saved it in the same evidence folder. Eventually, they turned the car around and left. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. The forest remembers everything. I shut the laptop, turned off the lights, and stood at the window. The reflection showed my face, calm, unreadable, the same look I used to give before launching an operation. Some people wait for luck. I wait for data. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet earth. Somewhere, far out in the dark, a wolf howled, once long, low, almost bored. It wasn't a threat. It was just acknowledgement. By morning, I'd already decided how this would go. Not with shouting, not with police at my door, not with another round of family drama played on speakerphone. This would go the way everything important in my life had ever gone by the plan. I brewed my coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sat at the table with my notebook open to a clean page. The title at the top read, Operational Response, Family Theater. I wasn't joking. You don't get to be a major by skipping the prep work. Under it, I drew 3 columns. Objective, method, contingency. Then I started writing. Objective 1. Secure assets. Already handled with the trust. Objective 2. Document hostile activity. In progress. Objective 3. Expose motive. Objective 4. Neutralize with precision, not emotion. I underlined that last part twice. People underestimate how efficient calm can be. Around 9, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I picked up anyway. Major Doyle? A man's voice asked. This is Adam Porter, from Adult Protective Services. We received a wellness inquiry regarding your living situation. There it was. Exactly as Kane predicted. Is that so? I said, sipping my coffee. Yes, ma'am. It's standard procedure. Would you be open to a brief home visit? Just routine. Of course, I said. You want this morning or afternoon? A pause. He wasn't used to cooperation. Afternoon would be fine. 2 o'clock sharp. I'll have coffee ready, I said. When I hung up, I felt that quiet click in my head, the one that used to happen before inspections on base. Nothing to hide, everything squared away, ready to go. I cleaned the counters, checked smoke detectors, aligned the papers on my desk by edge and angle, not to impress anyone, just to remind myself that order is its own defense. At exactly 2, a white SUV with county plates pulled into the drive. I watched the feed for half a second before opening the door. Porter stepped out, early 30s, clipboard, nervous smile. He wore a windbreaker that said, "Community services like that would stop a bullet." "Come in," I said. He looked around as he entered. Beautiful place. Remote. That's the point, I said. You want coffee? He blinked. Sure. I poured him a mug, black, and set it on the table. He took a cautious sip like it might bite. So, I said, who's worried about me? I'm not at liberty to disclose the reporting party, he said automatically. It's my sister, I said. He hesitated. We did receive a family concern, yes. Let me guess, I said. They said I'm unstable, paranoid, possibly a danger to myself or others? His eyebrows rose slightly. Something along those lines. I slid a folder across the table. Military medical discharge summary, psychological evaluation, recent physical, and the trust paperwork showing I'm of sound mind and body. You'll find all signatures current and notarized. He opened it, flipped through, and nodded. This is thorough. I like thorough, I said. Keeps things from falling apart. He smiled a little. Honestly, I wish more people made my job this easy. Most people aren't trained to anticipate sabotage, I said. He glanced up. That what this feels like to you? It doesn't feel like it, I said. It is. He finished his coffee and closed the folder. You're fine, Major. I'll file the report as no cause for concern. You'll get a copy if you'd like. I'd like, I said. When he left, I watched the SUV roll down the gravel road until the dust settled. Then I added a new entry in my notebook. APS visit complete cleared. Psychological stability confirmed. Family interference recorded. Later that night, I called Kane. They sent APS, I said. He didn't sound surprised. Expected that. How'd it go? They'll file me as competent. Good. That shuts down their next move. Once that report's official, they can't pursue conservatorship without perjury. I'd like copies of everything, I said. You'll have them tomorrow, he said. Also, I dug into your brother-in-law. Greg's not clean. I leaned back in my chair. Define not clean. Antifer. Bank records show multiple cash withdrawals tied to a gambling site. Mortgage 3 months behind. Credit cards maxed. There's also an account transfer from his father's Social Security check into his own name last quarter. That's fraud, I said. Yep. Federal kind. My contact at the bank flagged it but hasn't escalated yet. So they're not just greedy, I said. They're desperate. That's usually the worst combination. End one. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the screen a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't satisfaction, I felt it was confirmation. I'd spent years watching people fall apart under pressure. The pattern never changes. Fear makes people stupid, and stupid people make paperwork. The next day, I drove into town again. Same post office, same gas station, same line of tourists taking photos of elk. Everything normal. I mailed certified copies of my trust documents to Kane's office, my bank, and a digital archive service that specializes in veteran estate protection. Paper redundancy saves you when people start losing files. When I got home, I found a voicemail waiting. Trisha again. Her tone was different this time, tired, strained. I don't know what's happening anymore, she said. Greg's furious. He thinks you're trying to ruin us. He said he's going to call a lawyer. I don't even know what for. Just please, don't make this worse. I played it twice, saving the file with the rest. People always reveal the truth when they think they're appealing to your mercy. That evening, I walked the property. The air smelled of pine and thawing ground. A raven sat on the fence post, head cocked, watching me like it understood something I didn't. I kept walking until the trees swallowed the last light. Out here, you learn how to listen without thinking. The forest doesn't lie. It just tells you how small you are. Inside, I sat down and went through Greg's public records. Something every veteran learns fast. People love leaving trails. A few minutes on the county property site showed his house in Cheyenne listed as Notice of Default. I cross-checked it with the assessor's page. Same address, same names. 3 missed payments, bank pending repossession. I printed it out, marked the date, and clipped it to the growing stack. Underneath, I wrote, Motive, financial collapse. Target, property acquisition via manipulation. That night, the wind rose again. Not gentle this time, harsh, carrying grit and dry leaves that slapped the windows like small hands. I sat there watching the dark, waiting for the noise to settle. Eventually it did, but I didn't move. I just kept thinking about how easily people mistake silence for surrender. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Kane. Documents filed, trust secure, APS report logged as favorable. Also, a federal contact flagged Greg's name for review under benefits misuse. Will update when official. I replied with one sentence, understood, proceed as needed. Then I powered down the laptop and sat back, arms folded, eyes closed. No anger, no satisfaction, just the same focus I used to feel before a night operation. You don't rush. You wait for conditions to align. The sound of the forest faded into background hum, the kind of quiet that comes after you've already chosen your next move. The coffee pot clicked once as it cooled, a small, final sound in the room. I didn't flinch. I knew the next day would bring something new to record, something they'd try next. And when it did, I'd already be there waiting, pen in hand, paperwork ready, calm as ever. The next morning started with the sound of gravel crunching under tires. I looked at the camera feed before checking the window. Old habit. A gray sedan stopped at the end of my drive. County plates again. Not the Ranger. Not APS. Different badge this time. Adult Protective Services follow. Up division. The line under the logo read Case Audit and Compliance. Bureaucracy always comes in twos. I opened the door before they could knock. A woman in her 50s, business casual with hiking boots, stood there holding a clipboard like a shield. Miss Doyle? Major, I said. But yes. She smiled tightly. We just need to verify that our report from yesterday aligns with county data. It's routine. Routine seems to enjoy my address lately, I said. Come on in. She stepped inside, scanned the room with the kind of eye that counts toothbrushes in a cup. Behind her, a younger guy carried a tablet and pretended he wasn't judging my furniture. You live alone? She asked. Correct. Any firearms in the house? Yes, 2. Both registered. Locked in a safe. No ammo chambered. Want to see the paperwork? She hesitated, like she hadn't expected someone to be that prepared. That won't be necessary. I gestured toward the table. Coffee's fresh if you drink it black. The younger one smiled, maybe thinking I was flirting. I wasn't. We're fine, he said. They asked the usual health, social support, medication, access to services. I answered every question in complete sentences. No hesitation, no small talk. They checked boxes on their forms, thanked me for my time, and left faster than they came. I waited until the SUV disappeared down the road, then called Kane. They're doubling down, I said. Expected, he said. Greg's probably pushing every button he can find. Let him. Each visit clears you a little more. I'm not worried about visits, I said. I'm worried about escalation. It won't last, he said. Desperate people burn fast. He was right about that, but I'd learned long ago not to rely on enemy incompetence. It's a strategy that ends in body bags. I spent the rest of the morning filing everything: visit summaries, timestamps, badge numbers. I printed the APS clearance letter and pinned it on the fridge next to the maintenance log. Call it decor for the overly organized. At noon, I checked my voicemail again. One message stood out: local number. Unknown. Miss Doyle, this is Investigator Lowell from the County Fraud Division. We'd like to discuss a case related to federal benefit misuse. Please return our call. I played it twice. The voice was calm, official, not phishing. I called back. This is Doyle, I said. Major Doyle, the man corrected politely. Appreciate you calling back. We're looking into a claim filed under your address for supplemental benefits. 2 individuals listed their residence as your cabin. Eleanor and George Walsh. Arg. I took a slow breath. Those are my sister's in-laws. Are they residents at your address? No, I said. Never have been. I have security footage proving they've never stayed a single night here. That footage could be very useful, he said. Would you be willing to provide copies? Already archived, I said. When do you need them? He chuckled softly. You really were military. Guilty. Howit Tebble. He gave me an email address, and within an hour I'd uploaded everything: video files, stills, timestamps, property records. The paper trail was clean, layered, and deadly precise. When I hung up, I leaned back in the chair and watched the upload bar crawl to completion. That line on the screen might as well have been the fuse on a slow-burning charge. Later that day, Trisha called again. I could tell from the first word she'd been crying. Karen, they're under investigation. Insection. I know, I said. You reported them? I didn't, I said. But the truth tends to file its own paperwork. This could ruin them, she said, voice cracking. Trisha, I said calmly. They used my address to collect benefits they didn't qualify for. That's fraud. Not an accident, not bad luck. Fraud. She started to say something, then stopped. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear her breath shaking. Greg says you're doing this for revenge, she whispered. I'm doing this for accuracy, I said. Revenge is just a word people use when fairness finally arrives. She hung up again. It was becoming a habit. That evening, Kane called with an update. Federal investigators requested your footage. That's fast. I sent it already, I said. He laughed. I should have known. They're going to love you. Most witnesses forget what year it is. Discipline has its perks. He paused. You ever think maybe the Air Force taught you too well? Only when I run out of coffee. By sunset, the mountains were dipped in gold, shadows long and slow across the clearing. I stood on the porch and watched the light shift, thinking about Trisha. She wasn't evil, just weak in that soft, hopeful way people get when they think family ties outrank logic. She'd married Greg because he was confident, because he promised stability, because she believed confidence and competence were the same thing. They're not. Inside, the phone buzzed again, text this time. From Greg. You're going to regret this. You have no idea who you're messing with. I stared at it for a second, then replied, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. That's the problem. No response. I made dinner, rice, chicken, nothing fancy. Old habits die by portion size. I ate standing at the counter, flipping through emails, until I found one from Kane titled, Ownership Confirmation. Inside was the trust certificate, officially recorded and sealed. My signature sat on the page like a quiet boundary line no one could cross. After dinner, I double-checked my perimeter cameras. Motion sensors steady, no vehicles in the last 3 hours. Wildlife only 1 fox, 2 deer, something that looked like a porcupine trying to figure out my trash can. I smiled for the first time in days. Then, at exactly 9:46 p.m., the driveway alert pinged again. I opened the feed. Headlights. A truck this time. Dark blue, heavy frame, unfamiliar plates. It rolled to a stop halfway up the drive. The engine idled for a few seconds, then cut off. Men got out. Greg. He looked around, pacing near the porch steps. Hands shoved in pockets, posture stiff with anger. The camera mic picked up bits of his muttering my name, curses, fragments like, pay for this. He turned toward the door and started up the steps. I didn't move. I just kept watching. He knocked once, hard, then again, louder. Karen. Silence. He waited a minute, then pounded the door. You think this is over? You're a lunatic. You'll see what happens when… The sensor light above him clicked on, sudden and white. He flinched, threw up a hand. The camera caught every frame. Then, realizing he was being recorded, he backed off, muttered something, and stomped to his truck. Gravel spun under his tires as he tore down the drive. I saved the footage, labeled it Threat, Greg Walsh, 2146, and backed it up twice. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the dark road. My pulse never changed. Years of night ops taught me the value of breathing slower than your fear. Somewhere deep in the woods, the wind shifted. The motion light clicked off, leaving only the faint glow of the moon through the trees. I stood there a long time, until my reflection disappeared in the glass, and all that was left outside was calm, open space, exactly the kind of space where the truth eventually finds everyone who thinks they're clever enough to outrun it. The next morning came without sunlight, just a low, cold fog that wrapped the cabin like gauze. I sat at the table with my coffee, laptop open, reviewing the files from last night. Greg's visit was neatly archived, time-stamped, watermarked, copied to 3 different drives. It wasn't paranoia. It was just standard procedure. At 8:17, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Washington area code this time. Major Doyle? The voice was deep, calm, confident. This is Agent Rebecca Shaw with the Federal Office of Inspector General. We've received your documentation regarding potential misuse of benefits. I wanted to confirm a few details. Of course, I said, keeping my tone neutral. We've already verified that Social Security checks for George and Eleanor Walsh were rerouted to a Wyoming post office box last quarter, then linked to a debit account under Gregory Walsh. You can confirm you never authorized use of your address? I can confirm that, I said. I have continuous video surveillance on the property. I'll provide the raw files if necessary. That won't be necessary yet, she said. But we may reach out again for a statement. If you receive any contact from the subjects, notify us immediately. Understood. Thank you for your cooperation, Major. You've helped us connect a few dots that were overdue for attention. Happy to assist, I said, then ended the call and sat there for a minute, letting the quiet fill the room. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, more like closure waiting its turn. By noon, the fog had lifted, and the sunlight cut through the trees again, sharp and cold. I walked the perimeter with a notepad, checking the fence line, jotting small details, loose wire, animal tracks, a downed branch. Routine keeps the mind still. Halfway through the walk, a truck slowed on the road. Not Greg's, a white pickup with no markings, 2 men in the cab. They didn't stop, just rolled past slowly enough to make their curiosity obvious. I lifted my phone and took a picture of the license plate. People act different when they know someone's writing things down. When I got back to the porch, a letter sat on the step, no envelope, folded once, wedged under a rock. I picked it up carefully. The handwriting was Greg's, jagged and rushed. You think you can ruin my life and walk away clean? You won't win. You're sick and everyone's going to see it. You can't hide behind your military crap forever. Oh, one? I read it twice, then slipped it into a plastic sleeve and wrote the date in the corner. Evidence doesn't care about tone. Inside, I opened my notebook again. New section. Hostile correspondence. One entry, neatly logged. Then another folder on the laptop. Same label, scanned copy inside. Organized revenge isn't revenge, it's strategy with better paperwork. By late afternoon, the phone rang again. Kane. Karen, he said. The feds are officially involved. That voicemail you got from Shaw, she's good. I worked with her years ago. If she's on it, they've already found enough to build a case. What happens next? I asked. They'll freeze the accounts first. Then come the interviews. Greg will panic, blame everyone, maybe even your sister. He'll make mistakes. They always do. He already has, I said. He left me a note. Kane sighed. Keep it. Don't respond. Don't engage. We want him unbalanced, not cornered. I can handle patience, I said. I know, he said, chuckling softly. You probably have it written on a list somewhere. Top of the page, I said. After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the line of trees beyond the clearing. Somewhere deep in there, a single crow called once, short and low. You start to notice how different sounds carry different meanings when you spend enough time in silence. That one didn't sound like warning. It sounded like witness. I went back to the kitchen, poured another coffee, and turned on the local news station just for background noise. 15 minutes in, the anchor read a small story out of Cheyenne, federal investigation into alleged benefit fraud involving multiple individuals. Details forthcoming. No names, no arrests yet. But I didn't need names to know. That night, I cooked dinner early and went over every document again, dates, names, balances, screenshots, property filings. I didn't believe in luck, but I believed in sequence. Keep your data straight, and the truth writes its own story. Around 9, my phone buzzed again this time, with a video call from Trisha. I debated letting it ring out, then answered. Her face appeared on the screen, pale and drawn. The background looked like a kitchen, maybe theirs. She'd been crying again. They froze our accounts, she said. Greg's losing it. He's blaming you for everything. I didn't file the charges, I said. Maybe not, but you gave them what they needed. I gave them facts, I said. If facts hurt, that's not on me. He says you've been planning this, that you're trying to destroy him. He told his parents it's a military vendetta. I almost laughed. Greg gives himself too much credit. The Air Force doesn't vendetta middle managers. She flinched, looking away. He's scared, Karen. He said things I've never heard him say before. He's not the same. People rarely are when consequences show up, I said. She hesitated. He said he might drive out there again. He shouldn't, I said. Next time he won't just see lights. She swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means I'll call the sheriff before he reaches my gate. She looked at me for a long time, tears gathering but not falling. Why are you like this? Because someone in this family has to be, I said, and ended the call. I didn't move for a while after that. Just stood there, phone in hand, listening to the fridge hum and the clock tick. Every sound felt louder in the quiet. You start realizing that peace doesn't mean nothing happens, it means you're ready when it does. Before going to bed, I checked the drive feed one last time. Empty road, no headlights. Just the woods breathing. I shut off the lights and left the phone charging on the counter. At 5:03 a.m., the alert tone woke me. Motion detected. Front approach. I opened the feed instantly. Not Greg this time. A police cruiser. The deputy stepped out, uniform sharp, flashlight sweeping the porch. I opened the door before he could knock. Morning, I said. Major Doyle? That's right. Sorry to wake you. We got a call from Mr. Gregory Walsh. Said he's concerned for your safety. Claimed you're unstable and may harm yourself. I didn't even sig. Come in, I said. He followed me inside, scanning the room like he was checking for ghosts. You seem fine to me, he said eventually. I handed him a folder. APS clearance, federal inquiry paperwork, trust documents, video of Mr. Walsh trespassing last night. He flipped through a few pages, nodded, and handed it back. Looks like he's wasting everyone's time. Story of my month, I said. He laughed quietly. You want us to file a harassment report? Not yet, I said. Let him keep talking. Every lie's another nail. He tipped his hat, said he'd note the visit, and left. I stood on the porch watching the taillights disappear through the trees. The morning air smelled sharp, clean, almost cold enough to sting. The sun hadn't come up yet, but the sky was turning from black to dark blue, that quiet hour where even the birds hold their breath. I stayed there until the light broke through the treetops, thin and golden, touching the edge of the porch rail like it had finally decided to take my side. Then I went back inside, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and opened my notebook to a new page. At the top, I wrote in all caps, "Silence is working." By the time the first real snow came down, the federal investigation was already chewing through Greg's life faster than a Wyoming winter eats through cheap tires. He'd stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped pretending he had any leverage left. Silence is underrated, it makes your enemies fill in the blanks for you. One morning, Kane called with a tone that almost sounded amused. Remember how you said you wanted leverage, not victory? I think we just found it. I leaned back in the chair. That sounds promising. Greg and his parents are 3 months behind on their mortgage, he said. The bank just filed the pre-foreclosure notice. They owe $32,000 in arrears. It'll hit the auction list next quarter if they don't pay up. Let me guess they can't. Not even close, he said. But here's the fun part. I know a private investment broker who buys distressed debt and flips the lien. Legal, clean, perfectly boring. You'd never show up in the paperwork. I didn't say anything right away. My mind was already lining up the angles, the numbers, the payoff. Not in money, but in position. What's the buy-in? I asked. About $8,000. That's it? Yep. Once it's transferred, you'd technically hold the note under a limited trust. You'd be their creditor. They'd owe you. They wouldn't know it. I laughed quietly. That's poetic. It's legal poetry, he said. My favorite kind. We went over the logistics for half an hour. I wired the money that afternoon. Paperwork moved faster than I expected. 2 days later, the Trust Evergreen Property Holdings LLC owned the Walsh family's mortgage. They were still living in their Cheyenne house, blissfully unaware that their landlord was now the woman they'd called unstable. I didn't tell anyone, not even Kane, until it was finalized. The moment the confirmation email hit my inbox, I printed the deed transfer, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same fireproof safe under my bed. Some victories don't need witnesses. The following week, the weather turned mean snow heavy enough to bury fences, wind sharp enough to cut through wool. I kept the cabin sealed, the fire steady, the generator full. Routine, again. I'd spent half my life surviving things colder than this. Around noon, the phone buzzed. Trisha again. Her voice was quiet, almost small. He lost his job, she said. I didn't ask who he was. Corporate restructuring, she said. He's panicking. He thinks the investigation cost him everything. I'm sure the math helped, I said. Karen, please, she said. He's talking crazy. He said if the bank forecloses, we'll have nowhere to go. That's unfortunate, I said. Can't you help? You have resources. You always land on your feet. And I earned my footing, I said. He gambled his away. She went quiet for a moment. You sound just like Dad. He taught me well, I said. When she hung up, I didn't feel triumphant, just tired. Revenge isn't loud, it's a steady hum that fills the background until you almost forget it's there. That night, Kane called again. Paperwork's official, he said. You're their creditor. Good, I said. What do you want to do with it? Nothing, I said. Let them keep paying. As long as they stay on schedule, they'll never know whose pocket they're filling. He laughed. You're a dangerous kind of calm, Major. Calm wins wars, I said. The next few days blurred together snow, wind, silence. I fixed the porch railing, salted the steps, refilled the woodpile. I checked the cameras twice a day out of habit, not fear. The wolves still came by sometimes, slipping through the trees like shadows. They didn't bother me, they never did. Late one night, while reviewing footage, I saw something that made me stop. Greg's truck, parked on the far edge of the road again. He didn't approach the cabin this time. Just sat there, headlights off, engine idling. Maybe he was thinking. Maybe he was too scared to do more. Either way, I recorded the timestamp and closed the laptop. Kane called the next morning. Got another update, he said. Federal investigators confirmed charges against Greg's parents for benefit fraud. Probation and restitution, most likely. Greg's still under review. Good, I said. He's going to crack soon, Kane said. When people like him lose control, they reach for something stupid. I'm counting on it, I said. He laughed. You're something else, Karen. I've been called worse, I said. That afternoon, I went into town to restock supplies, gasoline, canned food, a new padlock for the shed. The cashier, a kid barely old enough to shave, mentioned he'd seen a man waiting in a truck near the post office, watching people come and go. Weird guy, he said. Didn't buy anything. Just sat there. I smiled faintly. People always forget cameras see more than they do. When I got home, I checked the perimeter feed again. Nothing. Just drifting snow and the long stretch of road fading into forest. At 6 that evening, a text came through from an unknown number. You think you're safe out there, but no one stays safe forever. No name, no punctuation, no signature. I screenshotted it, forwarded it to Kane, and labeled the file threat #2. He replied 2 minutes later, noted, keep everything documented. He's desperate now. That means you're winning. Winning wasn't the word I'd use. It felt more like containment. Every lie, every scheme, every accusation, they'd all circled back to the same point. The man who tried to weaponize family was now his own target. Later that night, while feeding the wood stove, I thought about how clean revenge looks on paper. No noise, no witnesses, no blood. Just a ledger shifting from red to black. Greg wanted control, and now every check he wrote went to me. Every month, a quiet reminder that the person he'd tried to destroy was the same one keeping his roof over his head. I didn't need him to know. The silence was enough. The knowledge that balance had been restored, that chaos had been contained, that was victory enough for someone who'd spent half her life learning that control is just another word for survival. The snow kept falling through the night, soft and relentless, covering everything: tire tracks, footprints, the memory of noise. The next morning, the world looked clean again, like it had finally remembered how to breathe. I stood at the window, coffee steaming in my hand, and watched a single hawk circle above the tree line, unbothered, steady. It didn't need to explain itself, neither did I. The snow had started to melt by the time Greg finally decided to make his move. You could feel it in the air, that ugly mix of thaw and tension. The road was still slick with slush when I saw his truck coming down the driveway on the camera feed, same dark Ford, dented bumper, temp plate half hanging off. I didn't panic. I just stood, grabbed my phone, hit record, and opened the door before he could knock. He didn't bother pretending to be civil this time. His voice was already raised when he stepped out of the truck. You ruined my life, Karen. I stayed on the porch, 6 feet higher, camera aimed square at him. No, I said. You ruined it yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you. He stomped closer, boots sinking into the half-melted snow. You think you're some kind of hero because you wore a uniform? You're a manipulative psycho who can't stand anyone else having control? Control? I said. You mean consequences? He froze for a split second. Then he laughed, one of those short, humorless laughs people make when they realize they're out of ammo. You can't keep hiding behind paperwork. You're not untouchable. That's the difference between us, I said quietly. I don't need to be untouchable. I just need to be right. He took another step, too close now. I raised my phone higher. You're being recorded, I said. Every word. Good, he said. Let them see what you really are. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, pacing like a man trying to find courage he didn't actually have. You think you won? You think taking everything from me makes you better? I didn't take anything, I said. You handed it to me when you lied, forged, and blamed everyone else for your mess. For a moment, he just stood there breathing hard, eyes darting between me and the camera lens. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You're getting served," he said, tossing it at my feet. "I filed for defamation." Ugh. I looked down at the crumpled sheet resting in the wet snow. "You filed it yourself?" "Yeah," he said proudly. "Then it's not valid," I said, picking it up. "You didn't even file through a process server. And you spelled defamation wrong." His face flushed red. "You're insane." "Not according to 2 doctors, a lawyer, and a federal investigator," I said. He didn't answer. He just turned, kicked at the slush, and stomped back to his truck. As he drove off, the tires sprayed a line of dirty snow across my mailbox. I kept recording until his taillights vanished through the trees. When the quiet returned, it felt heavier than before, like the air itself was waiting for something else to happen. I walked back inside, placed the paper on the kitchen table, and took a picture of it from 3 angles. Kane was going to love this. When I called him, he laughed so hard he coughed halfway through. "He filed pro se? That's suicide. And 40. He'll figure that out soon enough," I said. "He's unraveling fast. You need to stay sharp. He might get stupid." "I'm counting on it," I said. "People only show their real selves when they stop pretending to be smart." That night, I slept in the recliner near the window instead of the bedroom habit from deployments when the sound of engines meant more than any alarm clock. Around 1 a.m., headlights flared across the snow again. My camera feed caught Greg's truck parked at the same spot on the road, engine idling. I zoomed in. He wasn't alone this time. Someone was in the passenger seat. They didn't get out, just sat there for 20 minutes, talking, pointing toward the cabin. Then they drove off. In the morning, Kane confirmed what I already suspected. The passenger was his buddy from work, the one who just got fired too. Greg's been trying to rally back up, but no one wants to be part of his mess. "Never. He'll still try," I said. "Probably," he said. "But now you have everything on record. And I mean everything. Between the note, the texts, and that fake legal notice, you're bulletproof." "Bulletproof," I repeated, sipping my coffee. "That's a word I haven't heard in a while." "Just don't get literal about it," he said. The next few days were quiet again. Too quiet. The kind that feels like weather holding its breath. I kept working on small repairs, things that kept my hands busy. By Thursday, the sheriff's office called. "Miss Doyle," the deputy said, "we got a report of possible vandalism at your property." I looked out the window before answering. "You don't say," he sighed. "Mailbox smashed. Tire tracks in the ditch. Probably kids, but I figured you'd want to know." "Send me the photos," I said. He emailed them within the hour. The tread pattern matched Greg's truck perfectly. I printed the pictures, logged the date, added them to the evidence folder labeled harassment incidents. Kane called again that afternoon. "You want me to file a restraining order now?" "Not yet," I said. "If I file now, it's self-defense. If I wait, it's obstruction when he breaks it. Timing's everything." He paused. "You really were trained for this, huh?" "I was trained to survive," I said. That evening, Trisha showed up unannounced. I saw her car before I heard it. Small sedan, tires still caked with city slush. She didn't call ahead, just walked up the porch, eyes red, hands shaking. "Karen, please," she said, voice cracking. "He's losing it. He's drinking, talking about you nonstop. He said he's not afraid of the law." "You should be," I said. "I'm serious," she shouted. "He's not thinking straight. He blames you for everything. He said you made him a target." "He made himself one," I said. "And if he shows up again, he'll find out how accountability works." Her shoulders slumped. "You're really not going to help him?" "I already did," I said. "I didn't press charges the first 3 times he trespassed. That's charity where I come from." She looked at me, tears welling up. "He's still my husband. For now," I said. She turned away, walked back to her car, and drove off without another word. The sound of her tires faded down the road, leaving nothing but the crunch of old snow under my boots. I stood there a long time, staring at the empty space where her car had been, wondering if she'd ever realize that mercy and weakness aren't the same thing. That night, I cleaned my service pistol for the first time in years. I didn't load it, just checked the mechanism, oiled the slide, made sure the case was sealed and secure. The sound of metal clicking into place was strangely calming. Some habits never die. They just wait for an excuse. Before bed, I checked the cameras again. No trucks, no headlights, just wind through the trees and the faint glow of moonlight on snow. I poured one last cup of coffee and sat at the table, staring at the stack of documents that had grown into a tower of evidence. Each page represented a step he'd taken on his own. The lies, the threats, the arrogance. All I'd done was let gravity handle the rest. Outside, somewhere far off in the woods, a branch snapped under the weight of the cold. I didn't flinch. Some people hear that and think danger. I hear it and think stability returning. The day Trisha finally called again, her voice didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded hollow, like someone who'd run out of excuses. I was out back splitting logs when the phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "Karen," she said quietly. "I left him." "No." The axe hit the block with a solid crack. "Good." She took a shaky breath. "He tried to sell the house." I stopped mid-motion. "Your house?" "Yes," she said. "He found a realtor, had papers drawn up, said we needed cash for lawyers, but the realtor told him the mortgage was in default and that the lien holder refused the sale. He lost it. He said someone had bought the loan just to screw him over." "And what did you say?" "I didn't say anything. I didn't know what he was talking about." End quote. I didn't respond right away. The air was cold, dry, still. "You didn't," I said finally. "That's what matters." "Was it you?" she asked. The question hung there, suspended between blood and truth. "Yes," I said. "I bought the debt before the bank could sell it to someone worse. You and the kids would have lost the house otherwise." She didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. When she did, her voice cracked. "You've been protecting me this whole time." "The one. I've been protecting what's left of this family," I said. "The part that still deserves a chance." "He's gone," she said. "Packed a bag, drove off last night. I don't even know where." "Doesn't matter," I said. "He's out of your house, out of your life. That's the start." She sniffed hard. "I don't know whether to thank you or hate you." "You can do both," I said. "That's usually how truth feels." She gave a small laugh, one that broke halfway through. "I should have seen it sooner." You saw what you wanted to see," I said. "That's not a crime. It's called love. You just picked a man who used it like a weapon." For the first time in months, she didn't argue. That night, she showed up at my cabin with a duffel bag, puffy eyes, and the kind of exhaustion that goes deeper than sleep. I didn't say a word, just opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, she looked around like she was seeing it for the first time, the wood stove, the shelves lined with notebooks, the coffee pot that never cooled off. "You really live like this?" she asked softly. "It's quiet," I said. "Quiet's underrated." She sat down at the table, staring at her hands. "Everything's gone," she whispered. "The savings, the accounts, even the kids' college fund. He drained it all." I poured 2 mugs of coffee and set one in front of her. "Then we rebuild. From zero. You've done harder things." She looked up. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," I said, "but it's doable." We sat in silence for a while, the fire popping softly in the stove. After a few minutes, she said, "The agents came by the house yesterday. They took boxes, files, Greg's laptop. His parents are already facing charges. They said his name came up too." "Then justice is working," I said. She nodded slowly. "He's going to blame me." "Let him," I said. "Blame doesn't pay the bills." 19. For the next few days, she stayed at the cabin, helped stack firewood, cleaned dishes, read quietly by the window. She didn't talk much, but when she did, her words stopped trembling. By the 3rd night, she laughed at something on TV, a real laugh, not the broken kind. That was when I knew she was starting to come back. On the 4th morning, Kane drove up the hill. He parked, stepped out, and handed me a manila envelope. "It's official," he said. I opened it. Inside were copies of Greg's signed settlement. Full debt forgiveness for Trisha's house, in exchange for him waiving all claims to my property and hers. Every page notarized, stamped, airtight. "He signed?" I asked. Kane nodded. "He had no choice. He's broke, under federal investigation, and his lawyer told him he'd lose anyway. Trisha stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. So what happens now? Now you're free, I said. She took a long breath, steady this time. And him? He'll face whatever's left, I said. Court, fines, maybe prison. None of it's our concern anymore. Kane gave me a small nod. You handled this better than most of my clients ever could. You didn't just win, you documented a perfect defense. I smiled faintly. Old habits. He laughed. Well, your habits saved your life. After he left, Trisha and I walked out to the porch. The air was cold but clean, the mountains sharp against the sky. She leaned against the railing, looking out across the trees. Do you ever regret the military? She asked. I thought about it. Regret the service? No. Regret what it taught me about people? Sometimes. It makes it hard to trust anyone who hasn't proven themselves under fire. I think I finally understand what that means, she said quietly. That's the good thing about getting burned, I said. You stop mistaking sparks for warmth. She smiled a little at that. You always did talk like a field manual. Better than crying like a Hallmark movie, I said. That got a real laugh out of her. By evening, she'd packed her bag again, this time not to leave, but to move forward. There's a small rental opening in town, she said. Close to the school. I think I can manage it. I nodded. You'll do fine. I don't even know where to start, she said. Start with today, I said. You've already survived the hard part. End of free. She hugged me tight, desperate, honest. Thank you, she said. For what? For not giving up on me, she said. I didn't answer, just squeezed her shoulder and watched her drive down the mountain road until the red glow of her taillights disappeared between the trees. Back inside, I sat by the window, watching the snow fall again, slow, deliberate, like the world was erasing all the tracks that led here. The coffee on the table had gone cold, but I didn't care. The house was quiet again, the way it was supposed to be. Only this time, it didn't feel like isolation. It felt like closure taking its time. When the phone buzzed later that night, it wasn't Kane or the sheriff, it was Trisha. Just a short text. Got the place. Feels right. I smiled and typed back. Good. You earned it. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing through the trees with that soft rhythm that only comes when everything finally lines up the way it should. Weeks passed, and for the first time in what felt like years, life didn't feel like a battlefield. I still woke early, force of habit, but the silence outside wasn't the tense kind anymore. It was just peace. The kind of quiet that didn't demand alertness. I brewed my coffee, opened the window, and let the cold mountain air drift in. The phone rang mid-morning. Kane's voice was as steady as ever. Federal case closed, he said. Greg took a plea deal. 18 months, restitution, probation afterward. His parents, too. You're officially in the clear, and they can't contact you or Trisha again. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. That's clean. It's as clean as it gets, he said. And you'll like this, his probation officer already filed a no-contact clause with your address specifically listed. That's the part I wanted to hear, I said. Kane laughed. You finally going to relax now? I don't relax, I said. I decompress. Same thing for civilians, he said. I wouldn't know. After we hung up, I sat for a while, staring out at the tree line. The snow had melted into patches of dark earth, and the first hints of green were pushing through. Spring in Wyoming never arrived gracefully. It fought its way in, like everything else here. Trisha called that afternoon. Her voice sounded lighter, almost normal. The kids are back in school, she said. I found work at the local clinic. Small job, but it's steady. Auction. That's good, I said. They're smiling again, she added softly. I think they finally stopped asking when he's coming home. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They'll be fine, I said. You will too. She paused. You never said it, but thank you for everything. You already did, I said. I mean it this time, she said. You saved me. I didn't save you, I said. I just reminded you where the exits were. She laughed quietly. You always have to sound like a soldier, don't you? Old habits die hard. When we hung up, I looked around the cabin. The same walls, same smell of coffee and pine, same steady hum of the wood stove, but everything felt different. For the first time, it didn't feel like a bunker. It felt like a home. That night, I went through the folders stacked in the drawer one last time: documents, reports, timestamps, receipts, every bit of evidence that had built the foundation of my revenge. One by one, I fed them into the fireplace. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into smoke. It wasn't about hiding anything. It was about letting it go. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying that soft, hollow sound the woods make when they're almost asleep. Somewhere out there, a coyote called, sharp and distant. For once, it didn't sound like a warning. The next morning, I drove into town. Same road, same diner at the end of Main Street. The waitress recognized me instantly. "Haven't seen you in a while," she said, pouring coffee. "Been busy," I said. She smiled. "The usual trouble or new trouble?" "Neither," I said. "Just cleaning up the old kind." She laughed. "Well, you look like someone who finally got some sleep." "Feels like it," I said. After breakfast, I stopped by the hardware store. Picked up new paint, some fencing supplies, and a flag mount for the porch. The owner, a wiry old man with a Vietnam cap, nodded when he saw the emblem on my jacket. "Air Force?" "Yeah," I said. "Good to see another one still standing tall," he said. "Only way I know how," I said. Back home, I spent the rest of the day repairing the gate and repainting the front steps. Simple work, steady rhythm. There's something about fixing small things that makes the big things feel less heavy. Around sunset, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the drive. Same deputy as before. He waved as he got out. "Evening, Major. Just checking in. Greg's officially relocated to another state. Probation term signed. You won't be hearing from him again." I nodded. "Appreciated." He smiled. "Gotta say, most folks in your situation would have lost it. You handled it better than anyone I've seen." I shrugged. "Discipline's cheaper than therapy." He laughed. "That should be on a bumper sticker." When he left, I stood on the porch watching the last light fade over the mountains. The flag I'd just mounted caught a bit of the wind and fluttered gently. It wasn't ceremony, it was habit. You keep something standing to remind yourself what you've already endured. Inside, I poured a whiskey, just one. Sat at the table, phone on silent, and let the fire's crackle fill the room. It was strange how quiet peace can feel when you've spent years chasing it. Later, I opened my old service journal. There was a note from my CO on the inside cover, written years ago. "The mission isn't to fight forever, it's to know when to stand down." I'd ignored that line for most of my life. Now, it finally made sense. By the time the clock hit midnight, I turned off the lights and stepped out onto the porch again. The night was clear, stars sharp enough to cut through the dark. I could see every ridge, every pine, every part of the land that had once felt like exile. Now, it just felt like mine. Somewhere deep in the woods, I thought I heard a car on the far road, but it kept going. No headlights turned down my path, no tires on gravel, just the sound of distance staying where it belonged. I leaned against the post, hands in my jacket pockets, and smiled. Revenge wasn't the point anymore. It never really was. It was about setting the balance right, making sure truth had a place to stand. The rest was just noise. The mountains stayed quiet, the air steady, and the sky wide open. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't watching for anything. I was just here.